Hey, do you have a composer you think is crazy, cool, awesome? Listen to crazy, awesome music? Well, you're watching Crazy Cool Composers. Today's subject is Frederic Francois Chopin. If you don't know of him, he is one of the most important composers and pianists of the Romantic era. That's the period of music roughly between 1800 and 1900. And something before we get started, I need to explain. His name is Chopin, not Chopin. Actually, when I was younger, I used to think he was some sort of kung fu guy. Think about how awesome that would be. A piano player who uses kung fu and fights ninjas. Hollywood, make it happen. No, rather than being a Chinese martial artist, Chopin is actually Polish. And it is his Polish heritage and his impact on Polish culture that is important to his character. One thing you need to remember is that there was no such country as Poland at the time, as it had been conquered by the Germans. Not those ones. And then by a short guy who ate cheese, and sometimes ice cream, apparently. Frederic Francois Chopin was born in March of 1810 in the town of Zelazowa Wola, near Warsaw, or Warsaw. Actually, even from a young age, he was quite talented, both as a pianist and a composer. This piece you're hearing right now, he wrote it when he was 7 years old. How about that, Wolfgang Amadeus? Warsaw, or rather Warsaw, would be the place where he received his musical education. And it would be this unique Polish background that would influence his music. Indeed, his most numerous compositions are the mazurkas and the polonaises, both traditional Polish stances. He spent years traveling around Europe until he finally moved to Paris in 1831 so that he could learn the secret technique of bread boomerangs and add it to his already substantial kung fu arsenal. He is the man that brought perogies to France. In Paris, he became a successful piano teacher. Thing is, in Paris, there were about 10,000 piano teachers at the time. That's like saying, imagine there being 10,000 football coaches in a city that size. Okay, guys, we gotta beat Jimmy's team from down the lane. I might be exaggerating a little. It was there in Paris that he first met the writer George Sand. It was love at first sight, in the way of his initial impression was, what an unattractive person the Sand is. Is she really a woman? Is she a woman indeed? He certainly wouldn't have been the first person to be confused by her appearance. Aurore Dudevant, better known as George Sand, had been notorious at the time for the fact that she tended to dress like a man, drank and smoke like a man, and tended to party at establishments meant for men.
No, not that one, monsieur. He's a devil. By God, what a fine seat that fella George has.
Madame George Sand, dear, the authoress.
The previous year, 1835, Chopin had broken up with his fiancée, Polish painter Maria Wodzinska, and he was devastated. This sent him into a deeply depressive fit that he would later refer to as my tragedy. A sickly man, Chopin had contracted tuberculosis during his time in Paris. He was once visited by 3 doctors. The first told him that he was dead, the second that he was about to die, and the third that he was dying. Point taken, he was a very ill man. In these years of illness, George Sand became a figure of solidarity in his life, and it was during this period that their famous love affair started.
Are we at a livestock sale? She's a woman, not a goat.
During the winter of 38 and 39, despite his ailing health, Chopin took a trip to Mallorca with George Sand, hoping that the sea air would improve his health. And, it was actually a very interesting period of time in his life. Many different stories are told about the composer during his time on the island of Mallorca. One such story, recounted by Sand herself in her journal, A Winter at Mallorca, describes the unwed couple as being ostracized by the devout Catholic people of the island, forcing them, ironically enough, to spend the winter in an old monastery in the country. Another, more peculiar tale is told of Chopin being haunted by the ghosts of dead Polish leaders, pleading him to honor them in his music. I like to think it went a little something like this. You must write a piece of music to honor our great country forever. Isn't this ripping off the plot of Amadeus? That hasn't been written yet, so technically Amadeus ripped us off. Yeah, and we never got any royalties either. That doesn't make any sense. Besides, some of you haven't even been born yet. But we are all dead now. Woo! But so am I. We are just going to ignore that for now. You must write music for Polish people to be proud of. Yeah, it'll help us get over how sucky history has been for us. No. But stop flamming the story, perhaps, okay? I'm not updating till you give me 10 God reviews. We'll just be leaving then. As for his music, the style of his music, how should we explain it? It's full of doohickeys. Doohickey being a technical term. What I mean by doohickeys is that Chopin's music often has vibrant flourishes and fancy, virtuosic passages that require a high level of skill, really. These help garnish what are often otherwise fairly simple pieces, since unlike many composers of the time period, he preferred fairly simple forms and the folk style was popular at the time. Basically, sort of the pop music of the era, but as interpreted by a highly skilled performer. Picture like the jazz version of Justin Bieber, okay? An important thing to note about Chopin's music is that everything he ever wrote is either for the piano or involves the piano. Well, it is standard now that a musician makes music for themselves to perform. For example, a singer will be a songwriter, guitarists will write guitar licks and solos for the song they are performing. This was regarded as a bit unusual in classical circles, especially at the time period we're talking about. Beethoven, for instance, despite being an excellent pianist, is probably best known for his 9 symphonies. While his music is usually stereotyped as being the kind of standard sad piano music that you hear in the background of sad movies, which is the output of the depressed and suffering composer, fitting in with the 19th century Gothic image, Chopin's music is actually quite a bit more varied than that. For every dark and moody nocturne, there are at least as many joyous mazurkas to make up for it. And though he was often seen as being a quiet and sentimental pianist, he could be quite furious when it was called for. Take his revolutionary etude, for example. Story has it that it was written when Chopin heard of the Russian invasion of Poland. Take his revolutionary etude, for example. Story has it that it was written when Chopin heard of the Russian invasion of Poland. All his hate, all his anger, all his passion comes boiling out at this single moment in a sudden outburst. The music, it's so emotional. My heart.
I do not play before Tsarist butchers.
All people must die. Even great geniuses. Chopin was no different. And although his death was tragic, he didn't die as terribly young as, say, Mozart or Schubert, nor did he live to the age to see his own works fall into obscurity like Haydn and Franz Liszt. And really, it seems like he reached the typical conclusion for a tortured artist like himself. Apparently, moments before he died, he became an anime character in a world of his own dreams, though. Chopin is perhaps the most emulated composer in history. Virtually every piano player has at one time or another wished they were him. I myself certainly have not been immune from this. There are people who have devoted their careers to the performance of his music. You know, basically, if Clapton is the god of rock music, Chopin would have to be the god of the piano. Well, thank you for tuning in, watching this video. Hope you learned something. As for me, I have to go eat some more pierogies now. Goodbye.